And so the ilifu project, the institutions that together to establish and operate a data-centric, high-performance computing facility for data-intensive research. The partner institutions are the Cape University of Technology, which Dr. Chawari is a director of in the library, and he's going to give us a lot more information. The Stellenbosch University, and we have Wouter from the Stellenbosch University Library, the Saul Plaatje University, the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, University of Cape Town, and University of the Western Cape. Colleagues, the objective of this webinar is to build awareness and to share very briefly an overview of the
Charlene is muted.
Charlene? Charlene, you're on mute.
I was just carrying on. Okay, can everyone hear me then now? Am I clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll start again. Very warm welcome to the colleagues. And this is a first webinar from CHELSA. I am Dr. Charlene Neerpad, the chairperson of CHELSA. And this webinar, the objective of the webinar this morning is to build awareness and to share an overview, a very brief overview of the ilifu project in relation to research data management. So what is the ilifu project? A very short background. During 2016, UCT led a consortium of institutions in the Western Cape to put in a bid to the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System, supported by the Department of Science and Technology. The goal of this bid was to build a data-intensive research facility in the Western Cape that would cater explicitly to the needs of researchers working in astronomy and bioinformatics, two areas in which the universities in the Western Cape have a strong international presence. The bid was successful and the project has undergone advancements. The project is known as ilifu and it means cloud in isiXhosa. So what is ilifu? The ilifu project, driven by the University of the Cape Town, is a consortium of Western Cape institutions project that together would establish and operate a data-centric, high-performance computing facility for data-intensive research. The partner institutions are the Cape University of Technology, Stellenbosch University, Saul Plaatje University, the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, the University of Cape Town, and the University of the Western Cape. To this effect, our webinar is based on presenters mainly in the Western Cape, from the Western Cape libraries. And we have the lead presenter, Dr. Elisha Chawari, who's the director of the University of Technology in Peninsula University of Technology. So Dr. Chawari would give us a very brief overview of the Tier 2 Data Intensive Research Project and the Research Data Management and the Open Science Project. At this stage, I would like to welcome and say that Dr. Chawari is the CHELSA rep on the Open Science Steering Committee. Then we will be followed by Mr. Nicholas Zimmer from the University of Cape Town, and his presentation is on data governance and infrastructure services. We would also have a 10-minute presentation by Mr. Alfred Intole, who is the Deputy Director of Research and Scholarly Communication at the University of the Western Cape. And his presentation is based upon ethical and legal aspects, open science, open access, and authorization for reuse. We would be followed by another 10-minute presentation from Mr. Wouter Klapwijk from the University of Stellenbosch on standards, interoperability, certification, data archiving, and backup. And then it would be a consultations with the researcher community, conclusion of the project, and future activities which Dr. Chaware would lead us into. And with that, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Elisha Chaware, who would start the presentation this morning. So please give him your attention. I would also like if colleagues could unmute, and so we could hear and learn a lot more about the ilifu project. Very warm welcome, colleagues, and please do enjoy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, colleagues, for joining us for this. Anka, I think I'd like to share the presentation myself. If I could share from my side.
Okay, please let me know if you have that option.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Elisha, can you just maybe just position your face more so that you're not, the blinds are not so high up?
Okay.
You sit a little back.
You are not seeing me properly. Is that
okay? Now it's worse. Okay, yeah.
Is it better now?
Little, yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Like this?
Thank you. Yes, great.
Okay. So Anka, can you share then so that I share?
Sorry, Dr. Chaware, it's for some reason, is it not allowing you to share?
Okay, I'm still seeing some PowerPoint there in front of me. Let me see if I can share. All right. All right. Can you see my PowerPoint then?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So I can start. All right. I've got how many minutes? 20 minutes or 10 minutes? Okay, good morning, colleagues, once again, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we have gone through with regards the ilifu Tier 2 data intensive project, more specifically what we did with the research data management and open science project. So as Shalene said earlier on, the project really starts off in 2016 with that response to a DRISA call for proposals for the establishment of the first national data node. And the partners were led by UCT and CPUT, Stellenbosch, UWC, Soplaki, and SKA were the other partners. So what then followed, obviously, is what is in front of us, that cloud computing for data-intensive research project facilities are firmly in place, and they are being used by a number of users, in South Africa and I think globally as well. But before we go in, maybe let me just then take you a little bit back to the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System, NICIS. This is really the background with where the whole project came from. So the RISA is really part and parcel of that National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System, NICIS. And there's also the South African National Research Network, as well as the Center for High Performance Computing. And obviously, everything is being led under the Department of Science and Technology. So the RISA, once again, is part and parcel of NICIS, and is managed by the CSIR on behalf of the Department of Science and Technology. And in its work, it's complemented by the Center for High Performance Computing, as well as SANREN. So before then we go into the ilifu project, I thought maybe it might be important just to talk about the strategic directions in terms of where the National Cyber Infrastructure program, as well as the RISA and many other things are really growing. And also, what are the key drivers for those developments? The first one is the policy framework, which is known as the White Paper on Science and Innovation and Technology, as well as the Open Science Policy Framework that we are beginning to see unravel, as well as the National Big Data Strategy that the government is trying to drive. So if I take those key drivers one by one, first is the draft White Paper on Science, Technology and Innovation. Obviously, it was driven by the global developments in terms of how conducting science is changing globally, especially the whole question of open science. And also, I think the question of the national system of innovation also comes to the fore in terms of trying to bring all the key partners in that system to work together towards achieving certain goals. And the other aim or the other key point that we see in this draft white paper is all question of increasing human capital to drive science, technology, and innovation, as well as to really mobilize key funding to ensure that all these programs in science, technology, and innovation have got sufficient resources so that they can achieve their ultimate goals. On the issue of the
updating the list, but then we have to try to reach those students by phone. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, can I continue?
Anka, please unmute everyone.
So, because we need to do that. Okay.
Okay, so on the open science agenda, I think the issues are really about encouraging the adoption of open science policies in institutions and nationally, and also ensuring a balance between open science and intellectual property, and to ensure that the curation of confidential information is done in proper and standardized ways. And also the whole question of evaluation of metrics to link this to the question of career pathways for data scientists, as well as training in research infrastructure management. And again, the question of mobilizing long-term funding for the whole open science agenda. And when it comes to the national big data strategy, the issues really are to do with human capital development, the sustainability of the cyber infrastructure that is being built, as well as strengthening the research and development ecosystem, which is made up of government, academia, and the private sector, as well as ensuring good data governance. We'll hear more about that, especially in the areas of sharing data, reuse, and also the ethical use of big data. and the question of coordination of investments and initiatives that we are beginning to see coming together in different ways. So coming on then to the ilifu project, obviously the bid was won by the institutions in the Western Cape, and the ultimate aim really is to establish a number of nodes, not just in the Western Cape, but around the country. And these nodes are going to focus on different subject areas. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we look at the future project. So the initial ilifu project was funded for 3 years, and the ultimate aim obviously was to develop a cloud infrastructure, specifically focusing on astronomy and bioinformatics. And the component on the research data management project, which was then given to the libraries, had a certain mandate. And the way that we agreed in the agreement that the 6 institutions signed was that each library would contribute 1 day a week towards that particular project. And my colleagues are going to talk more specifically about how we then dealt with the issues of developing the RDM services for the infrastructure. So it's about the cloud infrastructure and the science projects, it's astronomy and bioinformatics, and obviously our very interest, which came to the libraries, the research data management project. And the reason why the CPUT was given the responsibility to lead the project was probably by and large some of the work that we had done far much earlier than many other institutions in terms of developing policies and guidelines, as well as using certain platforms and so on. But then we later mobilized everybody to create this RDM in open science project. Now I'm stuck. Maybe you have Anka. Are you there? I can't move my.
I'm here. I'm not sure. I haven't changed anything on my side. Maybe we can stop sharing and share again.
Okay. All right.
I'm still seeing your screen and I'm seeing your mouse moving across.
Yes, but I think I'm stuck now. I can't move my.
Oh dear.
Yes, I'm.
Do you want me to share from my side?
Yes. Okay. Maybe you can you can share from your side. Let me see. Okay, I'll pause share. Stop share. And then you can do. Okay. Go ahead then.
Okay, I'm just getting it in front of me.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Chawari, I think at this point we can ask the participants questions.
Okay, so
I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, she's got it.
No, she's got a completely wrong slides. That's not the slides.
Okay.
Anka. Yes, yeah, that's not the slide.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's not the slide. This is a different one.
Okay.
Oh my word. Okay.
Unshare and let Dr. Chawari share, reshare.
Okay. All right. So let me try to reshare again. Okay. Can you see mine again?
We can, yes.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's move on then. So the overall objectives of the RDM project was really to ensure that we do have a software platform and also develop those RDM services And I think it's now common knowledge that we all agreed on taking Figshare, which is now actually running in a number of institutions. So how did we approach this whole project? And what we did was then to go on and build teams, collaborative teams among or between the partner institutions. And then we started working on developing policies, the guidelines, and a work integrated program for the project. But before we did that, it was necessary that we do some kind of institutional maturity assessment, just to see where we were, all of us, in terms of research information and data management, as well as the capacity of the workforce within our institutions, the level of governance and leadership, as well as the technological infrastructures, as well as the issues of service delivery and management. So the structure of the project is as follows. Right at the top is the bigger ilifu project steering committee, which is really made up of the big gurus, that is the DVCs for research, and also the key project leaders in terms of the development of the cloud infrastructure, as well as many other arms that make up that bigger ilifu project. And underneath, we have the ilifu RDM project. And in terms of chairing, the chairing came to us as a CPUT. And within that group, we then created 4 working groups. So we've got working group 1, which focused on a certain issue, data governance, for example, and then working group 2, working group 3, and working group 4. And I'll talk a little bit more about those groups. So the first group focused on the issues of governance, data policy, and infrastructure. My colleague, one of my colleagues is going to talk about that. And within that group, we put in UCT, UWC, and CPUT. And on the right, there is working group 2, which focused on standards, interoperability, certification, and archiving. And Stellenbosch led that group with CPUT and UWC. And on the bottom right, there is working group 3, which focused on open science, open access, ethics, legal, and authorization for reuse, which was led by UWC, and it included UCT and Stellenbosch as well. And then on the left bottom is the question of advocacy and training, which was led by UCT with CPUT and Stellenbosch as the other members. So all in all, we then developed an implementation plan. But through the funding that we were given, there was provision to hire a project manager. So we had a project manager who was employed through UCT, but seconded to CPUT. And the project manager was there then to coordinate the work on the deliverables as outlined in the agreement that was signed with DIRISA. So there was deliverable 1 and deliverable 2, deliverable 3, deliverable 4, deliverable 5, as well as deliverable 6. And again, my colleagues are going to talk more about those deliverables. So in the end, maybe just in brief, we have managed we managed obviously to come up with the ilifu research data management services. As you can see on the screen there, how that all relates to the question of the national tier 1 in terms of that is the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure, the South African Research Network, DIRISA, and the Center for High Performance Computing. And then at tier 2 level is the ilifu project that we're talking about, and the first node being in the Western Cape, focusing on astronomy and bioinformatics. but the hope is that further nodes are then going to be developed in the other regions in the country, and also focusing on key subject areas that probably government has identified as the ones that should really kickstart some of these platforms. And then at tier 3, ask the institutions that then are working to complement the tier 1, the tier 2 and tier 1 activities. So the other outcome, obviously, I think that we managed to achieve is the whole question of policies and guidelines. And if you go to the ilifu website, you'll see these policies and guidelines that we managed to develop. And the process was that we developed these policies, and then we take them through a process of consultation with the researchers or the users, and then after that, we would then send them to DIRISA for final approval. And once they've been approved, then they would come and be deposited on the website. So the policies are there, and they're accessible to the public as well. And then obviously the one of the big outcomes was the question of all of us agreeing on taking Figshare as the preferred data repository, proprietary software platform. And again, this had to go through DIRISA, but DIRISA had to put a number of conditions in terms of allowing us to use or to take a Figshare. And some of those conditions included following: that other non-ilifu institutions should be allowed to join in contracting Figshare services. And I believe by now there are probably about 18 institutions nationally who are using a Figshare, and we hope that more will come on board. And then the other condition was that the Figshare managed data should be hosted locally at either the DIRISA or the ilifu storage facility. Probably one of my colleagues can also expand on that point. And then the other issue was that upon expiry of any service contracts, the data that is uploaded by members can be accessed and downloaded by a means unencumbered by any proprietary Figshare service or function. And then the other thing that we did is that we then negotiated with a tenant who is a service provider of many other services to take over the management of the subscriptions for Figshare. And that is currently happening. Anybody who then wants to subscribe to Figshare should go through Tenet, and you will then benefit from that kind of discount that we negotiated for the country. So the other outcome, obviously, is these platforms that we are seeing in front of us. At UCT, there's a very vibrant Ziva Hub with their data deposits. At the University of the Western Cape, there is Kikapu, again, very vibrant with a lot of data sets and many other things. At Stellenbosch, there is a Sun Scholar, again, very active. And within my own environment at CPUT, there's Isango, again, also growing in leaps and bounds in terms of data deposits. And then the other one outcome, which we are still to pursue, and I'll talk about this later on, in terms of the renewed funding that we have just received, was the question of producing a work integrated learning program. So we produced a very comprehensive work integrated learning program, which is aimed at placing data scientists or students who have just completed their data science programs within some of the research facilities that make up the ilifu project, so that they can gain a certain experience before they go into the workplace. Although not really fully implemented, We managed to place some of the students that we managed to place came from CPUT, from the Department of Mathematical Sciences. They were placed at a facility at the University of the Western Cape and did quite some commendable work. And we hope that going into the future, we will then work far much more harder to ensure that we also identify students who might want to work in those environments and gain experience in terms of data stewardship. Then the last part, in terms of activities, we are now very busy, and the 4 key institutions, that is UCT, CPUT, University of the Western Cape, and Stellenbosch, we are now working towards getting our repositories certified, and we are doing this through the Core Trust seal. So what we have done is we submitted the first round of applications, and we received back some comments, and we are now busy working on the second round of submissions, and hopefully soon we will get some feedback in terms of the outcomes of those applications, whether our repositories are certified. I think this is really a key process that probably in the future would also want to share with others nationally in terms of how we really went about these very complex applications. So in the end, what opportunities were created by us participating in this RDM project for the cloud computing infrastructure for astronomy and bioinformatics as librarians? I think one of the key thing was really that I think we got that opportunity really to develop a capacity amongst librarians who participated in this project. We were able to work across the 4 institutions, and we also did quite a number of publications or a number of presentations in different conferences in Botswana, in Poland, in Australia, and many other places, just highlighting the activities of the project. And again, there was quite a lot of community engagement, as well as engaging researchers, especially those who are still starting on their careers, so that they are fully acquainted with the whole processes of good data management, and also using institutional policies. And then obviously there are challenges in any project, and we should admit that there wasn't really anyone amongst ourselves who would call themselves an expert in whatever we did. So it was really a learning curve, and I think that learning curve in the end really shaped very well. Obviously would step on each other's toes, so on. But the final outcomes, I think we are very glad to say that we achieved the end goals set out in the contracts that the institutions signed. And the whole question of 4 or 5, 6 institutions with different working cultures coming together, it can be a challenge, but I think we managed to overcome those barriers and produce really world-class work in terms of the policies, the guidelines, the work integrated learning program that we have, and also being able to really submit our applications to Core Trust seal for the certification of our repositories. And obviously there are also challenges when it comes to remote collaborations and so on. So I think for now, Chair, I'll stop there and then give an opportunity to my colleagues then to speak about their specific areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chiware. So our next speaker is Mr. Nicholas Zimmer from UCT. Nicholas, you've got 10 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to take my camera off again just now because I don't think there's all that much to see with somebody wearing a mask in an open plan office. So I'm going to mute my camera again. Anke, I don't know if you've got my slides there.
I did. Do you want me to share them?
Yeah, please. Okay, great. So next slide. So I'll be very, very quickly going through these 5 overall points, just having a look at least some aspects of data governance in relation to this kind of gift of a cloud-based data repository infrastructure that we received through the ilifu project. So looking at resourcing and planning for data publishing, looking very briefly at 5-star open data and fair data, looking at some of the features of Figshare for institutions, and quite important to sometimes add that for institutions, because we need to differentiate that institutional control that we have from the free for everyone to use figshare.com, which is a bit distinct. And the ilifu RDM policy, more as a mention in regard to the data availability statement and the DOIs that we are minting through our Figshares for institutions, and because they're institution-specific DOIs, and then a very quick look at groups, as well as tiered instances. Okay, next slide. So very, very quick. These slides are a little bit more for if you're interested to look at them in more detail later on. I won't take you through all this little text, but just to give you an idea that there's very much there's a lot of information out there. You can see the link down there. But really, what we had in the backs of our minds and in our to-do lists was to get away from an ad hoc way of not really managing data to supporting an optimized for reuse research data environment where data is planned for, it's organized, it's saved and backed up, it's gotten ready for analysis. The analyzing of the data and the handling of the outputs is done in an optimal way, and of course the sharing and the publishing, which is quite the focus of today's presentation. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this should be familiar to everybody, and this is really our overall goal. We want to get away from this. Let me say a little bit cheekily, this 90s idea of, just putting PDFs on a server online. That's just not really where sustainable in this day and age. Particularly in view of the massive increase of digital data on a daily basis. So just making your stuff available on the web in whatever format, even if it is under an open license, according to the 5-star rating, really just gets you 1 star. So we really ideally want to get into an environment where we make it easy enough for researchers to make their data linked to other data and provide the context that's needed. And that's very much where the certification plays a big role that Elisha mentioned already, and where the use of Figshare for institution gives us good opportunities to get us all there. Next slide, please. So this is familiar to everybody, but just so we have it in a few simple to understand points. Fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable has a lot to do, or is basically concerns itself with metadata. So for all the library colleagues, this really should be our business. It has to do with describing, tagging, marking up, and ensuring that enough context exists so that everyone knows what can be done with the data. Okay, next slide. Let's maybe skip this one because I think there will be others talking about this. Next slide. So some of the features, so very, very important is of course the secure login and the opportunity given through Tenet, who provides Sapphire for federated authentication. So that's a boon that we all have through Tenet, is the use of Sapphire.
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. Next slide. And so in your metadata, you can add authors, and you can just do so by adding their email address. And if they are already on any Figshare for institutions or on the figshare.com, then the item that you're uploading or working on with them actually appears under their profile as well as yours. So there's also this new concept of multiple points of entry and single sources of truth. So that's a very, very important feature. Next slide. So this is what an author profile looks like. I've just used my own so that it's not in any way biased, and there's a link. So it's also a very nice platform for for concentrating your co-workers and collaborators, your outputs, etc. Yeah. Next slide. And there are various databases working in the background. So for instance, the database for funding is Dimension. So when you start typing in into your metadata item a fund number, it usually gets picked up, and then the wonderful thing is that the reporting really starts to work in a loop, as it should, where you can say, well, these are the outputs once after the funding has been given, and so this should be of great interest to the research officers of all the institutions involved. Yeah, next slide. And of course, there's depending on what the institutions want to do, you can make a range of licenses available. And the nice thing is you can also search by license, which is really also a user expectation nowadays, seeing as Google makes that available. So why should our repositories not do that? So searching by license is a great feature as well. Next one. And then of course, if your institution has appointed staff to actually review the submissions, then that's what's happening. This is a really interesting area, also nationally, where it's conceivable that because all the Figshare for institutions repositories really are linked with one another in the ways that I'm starting to show here. The authors can be added to items. They don't have to be from the same institution. They can be from all over the world, and so on. I'll show other features just now. But really, it is conceivable, and one can see it in other national contexts, for instance, in Holland, in the United States, and then also in larger institutions, including large funders like the National Institute of Health, that dedicated curation experts would be appointed to review or curate items submitted from a particular field of research where they have expertise. We are trying to solve this very tricky issue at the University of Cape Town with a community of data stewards and champions. At the moment, we have around about 100 in that sort of community of practice on campus. But it would be, I think it would be, as one looks forward into the next 5-10 years, maybe, it would be very interesting to see a national community of practice grow in this area. Next slide, please. So, for instance, there's also a project feature, which is very interesting for international collaboration because the environment is so secure and private first. Often there's a misconception that whatever I put up on Figshare goes live immediately. It doesn't. It is, first of all, just completely private to myself. And then through the projects feature, I can actually collaborate with colleagues all over the world. All they need really is a profile on the platform, just like you do on Twitter or on Figshare, on Facebook or any other platform. So yeah, the projects feature is very, very interesting. Next slide. We're going to have to go very quickly. So according to the guidelines which Prof. Chiwara has just shared with us, and which are available online, as we saw, one of the requirements is a data availability statement. Next slide, please. And another requirement is that the use of persistent identifiers to link directly to the data, so it's possible to scholarly cite the data, and so here's an example of how the DOI breaks down. And of course, in the case of Stellenbosch, there'll be a DOI that identifies the data as being from Stellenbosch, CPUT different again, UWC different again, etc. So this is an example of a UCT DOI, which is something that we're only getting through Figshare for institutions because we're basically subletting a license through Figshare with DataCite. So we're all beneficiaries of a membership with DataCite, who mint the DOIs for us. Okay, next slide. Okay, I just want to very quickly share. So this is the example of Monash University, how groups work. It's very through the use of Figshare for institutions as opposed to Figshare.com, the free version. We can actually create any kind of group and any kind of nesting of groups that we like. So I'd just like to share the example from Monash. If you go on Monash's Figshare.com, you'll see they've got how many is that? 10 groups there. Maybe it's changed by now. I mean, I took these screenshots a while back, and you'll see there's one group that's the Monash University thesis. So that's level 1, Monash University. Level 2 would be next slide, Monash University theses. And then you see they created subgroups for the theses according to faculties. So we'll just pick the Faculty of Science as an example. Next slide. So this then would be the bottom group, the Faculty of Science theses. So they've got a nesting that's sort of 3 deep, at least in this branch, and that's just an example for how groups work. I've quickly thrown together an example in the next slide of how we've done it at University of Cape Town with also initially faculties, right? So University of Cape Town is group 1, then we have Faculty of Science as an example, within which we have the Biological Sciences group, and then next, and then at the bottom of that, as the last of that branch, would be, for example, the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology. So what we're trying to put in place is, in terms of governance, is to have stewards to assist our library curators who have some subject knowledge and who have the direct contact with the PIs and researchers and teaching and learning staff in the various groups to help us make sure that the data quality is up there. Next slide, please. Oh, no. Going forward, or did I mess it up? Next slide.
Sorry, I'm just.
Seem to be going back. Okay, and now, okay, 2 back or 1 back.
Okay.
I'm almost done. Rushing a bit. So apart from the groups within an instance of Figshare for institutions, you can also view the groups as tiered instances upwards. So what we've been looking at is, UCT, and within UCT, the Faculty of Science, etc., downwards. So now what happens upwards? So what does exist, and this is now the next slide, please, is a Figshare South Africa. So you can see the URL down there, southafrica.figshare.com. And you'll see that there, they've used the groups feature to show the currently 16 live Figshare institutions. So you could, you can add that layer up above. And of course, you can add the next layer up above is basically figshare.com, right? That's how it works. That's the governance, right? Next slide. I think I'm basically, but it's possible. So this is a slide I've borrowed from Mark, the CEO, where it's conceivable that you structure things differently. You can think about it in terms of region or subject-specific data portals. You could create groups of portals for each grant code, etc., etc. So there's a lot of flexibility in the system, and what it does is challenge us to think about where do we want to position human resources, where do we need to position human resources effectively to ensure, of course, compliance, but also just effective collaboration and a better world for all, basically. All right, next slide would be probably any questions, but there isn't any time, so there's lots of ways of getting hold of us, and I'm always happy to chat further. It's a little bit of a challenge to try and address many interconnected questions, each of which can take one down a rabbit hole. So thank you for bearing with me, and over to the next.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Zimmer. I think that was very informative, and I'm sorry that I had to rush you for it, but I think you've given us a whole detailed information and a lot more than we had already know. So thank you very much, and that was fantastic. So our next speaker, colleagues, is my Deputy Director, Mr. Alfred Ntole. So Alfred, you do have to put your video on now, because I do want to showcase you. And so Alfred is going to speak about ethical and legal aspects on open science, open access, and authorization for reuse. Alfred, you can go ahead. So I didn't see Alfred. Has he got his video on? He's normally shy with the video. Alfred, you can continue.
Alfred is muted.
Alfred, you're muted.
Thank you, Anke. I was just saying what is reflected on the program is not what you see on my slide. I have reasons for that, and I can apologize to the participants if they feel misled. I've anticipated that most of the issues, Dr. Chiwara, as he has done, he will touch on them in his overview. So the angle I'm taking, in this presentation is to demonstrate maybe how the ilifu RDM project benefited UWC Library, to partner with other stakeholders within UWC and outside UWC, and to implement, to do some of the practical things that were not there before. Because of this project, we managed to find ourselves. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is the work of the working group tree, which I led. Part of that group had Samuel from Stellenbosch University was part of the group. Jeremiah when he was still at UCT, and then later Sanjin joined that group. If you look at that illustration there, it was going to be very impractical and impossible for me to speak about all those issues that occurred in 10 minutes. that's one of the reasons I decided to take a different route. But in any case, the section C of the guidelines that we developed, I think Nicholas referred to it, as well as Elisha referred to it. So section C of that document, which is available for anybody to view in the ilifu website, deals with all those issues that are listed. As some of us should know, SF, as well as the Department of Science and Innovation, they are currently busy tackling some of those issues related to open science, the white papers, the framework, and all that. So, excuse me. So that is work in progress. But we've looked at the documentation that we had at that time, and then we used that documentation to develop those guidelines. So next slide, please. Can I go to the next slide? As I've indicated, the direction I'm taking is just to show how the ilifu RDM project, assisted UWC to start actually where there was nothing in terms of RDM at UWC, to start doing some work to ensure that we do have services in RDM. This slide just shows you, as early as January 2019, we started with the drafting of the RDM policy, which is very important. Although Dale would always tell us, policy is not, everything. You have to start with your services while you start developing the policy. As you can see, we started in January 2019, but our policy was only approved in 2021. I think it was in April. So these processes, they can take long. However, for us, what was important was that on one side we had, the ilifu project, which was some kind of building our capacity. On the other hand, we're trying to introduce and implement whatever we can implement at our institution. Next slide, please. In this slide again, and this one is just to show how, if you have the capacity as a library, you are part of, the institutional goal of meeting the RDM goals. There, I just highlighted, in terms of our RDM policy that is now in place, the library there is viewed as one of the policy drivers, which is important for us as librarians. Next slide, please. Okay, and again there, it is the same point I'm trying to make. There's a task team on research data management at UWC. It's not just the library. It forms part of our institutional POPIA compliance reference group. We are dealing with a lot of issues there, but library is involved with other stakeholders. Again, thanks to the ilifu project, we are able to participate on those forums with confidence, because we do have the experience, and we have learned. I think Prof. Dr. Chiwara, spoke about one of the challenges of ilifu was that it was a learning curve, but to me it was a worthwhile learning curve. Next slide, please. On this slide, I just want to demonstrate, at UWC, these are the current conversations that we have. Some of these are things that will be implemented, started implementing. On that working group, for instance, this is if you remember my the topic, on the first slide, it was about the library being involved in the research ecosystem of the university. those are the normal processes of in terms of when the research proposal comes, it needs to be POPIA compliant. If you look at that diagram, you can forget about the other boxes, but if you look at the red new, that red new indicates something, the collection as per data management plan. And then if you look down there, it support for research data management plan, the e-research, the library and the faculties, we work together to ensure, within that workflow, the library is involved. It goes on. So again, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is how, because this is something new. I think we only started this process in 2020, 2021, but with the expertise that we will gain from the collaborative research with ilifu, we managed to gain those skills and we're able to be part of these workflows. Next slide, please. I think this one is the same. It's just a different workflow. Again, it's about the registration of the research projects within the university. Again, you will see what has been added is data management plans. So the library with other stakeholders are involved in ensuring that the universities, either the researchers or students or whoever, or the research ethics committees, when they need assistance, the library is involved in that process. Next slide, please. Okay, maybe just to also to indicate what we are doing. One of our biggest achievements, as we see in terms of RDM, I can say is that in one of our faculties, the RDM is at master's level, is in the curriculum. I know Mark is either today or on Monday, he's got one of those classes. So to us that speaks to partly what the working group 4 was working on, in terms of advocacy, so on that level, at master's level, we know in that faculty that students, there are classes that are provided by the library, in terms of RDM, but that's an area that we want to expand on to make sure we have more faculties taking up the opportunity to have RDM as part of the curriculum. The famous term for the librarians will be embedding RDM into the curriculum. We will also provide, regular, I think maybe twice a year, the modules, introduction to RDM, unpacking our UWC RDM policy, introduction to PICAPO, which is our fixture instance, creating and updating data management plans. And also this year, we are looking at introducing data literacy training. We have the information and research guides, to support our researchers as well. Next slide, please. Here, I also just want to show this is a UWC draft research strategy. Again, here, what I'm trying to highlight here is if as libraries we have capacity, we are involved, we have a place to, we have a role to play. I think on this slide, point 5, it speaks about provide effective, secure, and user-friendly solutions for all phases of research data management lifestyle, and create a community of practice around, RDM. So in that e-research strategy, we are there because we are the entity at UWC that deal with research data management. Next slide, please. Again, on these slides, I've extracted some of this information to some of our documents. These are the commitments that have been made by the institutions in terms of the entire data field. But if you just throw your eyes on point 4, it just clearly states that UWC library services need to put an increased emphasis on research data management, open access publishing, fair, findable, accessible, interpretable, and readable data. I think that's the slide that Niklas also showed. The reason I'm showing this slide is just to show how, if we work, as an institution, the library, we're finding ourselves being, embedded in these processes and taking our rightful role. The last slide, please. Okay, I think that's my last slide, but that's in conclusion again. What I was trying to demonstrate here in 10 minutes, because this is a 1.5 hour kind of presentation, is how we as UWC Library, took the advantage of the ilifu, RDM regional collaboration. Firstly, to capacitate ourselves as the library, to make sure that we do have the skills. I think again, Elisha mentioned that when we started with the ilifu, there was no expert. We were all learning as we went along. And then the second point I want to make is that, as a library, we are recognized as one of the drivers of the RDM in our institution. Last but not least is that, the RDM services, it's not about the library kind of coming and implementing them. It's rather about the library, taking its rightful role, within the university ecosystem and have to make sure that the faculty services are in place. I think I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. That was also very informative. Thank you very much for your presentation. And we would go to the next speaker, who's the Director of IT at STEM.
Right. Good morning. I think Shalene, you just cut out there, but I'm going to get started. I'll just put my camera off. Thank you. So thank you. Yes, perhaps Anke, we can just have you control the slides and I'll run through my presentation. Please note that a lot which has already been said by Elijah and particularly also Niklas is also part of my presentation. So I'll be referring to that very briefly when I get to those points and I'll skip over them when necessary. So I'm particularly going to give feedback on some of the work done by Working Group 2. You might recall that Elijah referred to the 4 working groups. And Working Group 2, the brief of that working group was to investigate standards, interoperability, certification, data archiving, backup and loss considerations for the federated infrastructure in the ilifu RDM project. Thank you. So next slide. So just very briefly, just to create a little bit of context, if we don't already have it, and I know a lot has already been given in terms of context, but we have 4 data repositories amongst the 4 higher education institutions in the Western Cape. We do not have a single or shared instance, neither is one required for this RDM project. The ultimate goal of the project was to be federated into the RISA framework of data repositories, so hence institutional repositories only were required. We're using a common underlying system, as you know, which is called Fixture for institutions, and our cloud storage is on Amazon, and particularly in the European region. This is very important because South African legislation prefers the European region for out of the country data locations. Then also just briefly, this is not a big data platform, neither is it meant to be. Within the ilifu project, there is another infrastructure built on the iRADS platform, which supports big data curation. This is data curation for data sets supplementary to research articles. So just keep that in mind when we go through the different considerations for standard certification and interoperability. The system is, however, capable of administering different file formats, sizes, and types, similar to big data, although it's not used for that purpose. Next slide, please. Yes, so I'm just stressing that point again. The research data management life cycle we managing in this project is not one of a big data research data management life cycle. That is something completely different. I've just given a very brief overview of what a big data life cycle would look within a research data management context. But I'm not going to stop and go into that into detail. Obviously, these slides will be shared after the webinar, and you're welcome to look at that then. Next slide, please. So looking at standards first, and here we're looking at specifically at the standards the working group had to investigate to adhere for data infrastructure, firstly, and content administration, secondly. Now, you might think if we investigating standards for data infrastructure, that would mostly adhere to, be applicable to infrastructure you need to build yourself. Here we're getting a cloud infrastructure, so our focus was mostly on the content administration. Next slide, please. And in doing so, we focused on depositing the data for the content administration, because the goal of the project was initially to get as much data from our institutions onto the platform. So that's where our main focus was. And in doing so, we were focused on authentication standards and metadata standards. So with reference to the ilifu guidelines, which Nicholas and Elijah have referred to and which are on the website, in section B4 of the guidelines, we're referring to authentication standards, and authentication standards we've implemented in the project is also to, or how Nicholas has already alluded to, the federation of authentication through the Sapphire project of the Tenet consortium. And here what we did is we mapped our different directory attributes of our entities on campus, whether those are students or staff entities, to the EduPerson data model. The common sharing of the EduPerson affiliation attributes are the important instrument you need to use in order to assign a quota, a disk quota, to your different users when they authenticate on the system. So obviously all users, whether the students or staff, will need to upload data to the system and need to know how much data they can upload, and they need to be pre-assigned a data quota. Next slide, please. So the detail here on the screen is not very readable. This slide and the next two basically is a breakdown of our different staff entity types at Stellenbosch University and how we're mapping them to the EduPerson affiliations. Next slide. This slide is also just an example of how our academic staff, support staff, and wages staff all have a different EduPerson affiliation map to it. Next slide, please. And this one is an indication of how our different qualification types are also mapped to EduPerson affiliations. The reason for this is if you are a postgraduate student, depending on whether you're a master's or a PhD student or doing your PhD, your further studies after a PhD, you will get a certain disk quota assigned to you. It will be more or less depending on what your graduate level of study is. So we did that mapping in our tables to determine if you're doing a short course, obviously you get a different affiliation than a postdoctoral student. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for, postdoctoral. So next slide, please. So going on to metadata standards, in the section B.5 of the ilifu guidelines, it specifically specifies that data deposit are to be guided by a metadata guide that outlines the preferred metadata schema for a specified field or institutions. Now you can imagine that giving astronomy and bioinformatics, we would have different, or we would prefer to have different metadata schemas describe the data that is being uploaded to Figshare. We have standardized our metadata schema around the data site metadata schema, and not necessarily the Dublin Core one, which is ISO 15836, although we do have Dublin Core elements incorporated into it. But going forward, as we expand the system to include data from other discipline fields, we might have to create additional metadata schemas, and they need to be created according to the metadata schema guidelines, which are good international practices. Similarly, for controlled vocabularies or systems of knowledge organization, those thesaurus or those vocabularies, those taxonomies should be in line with international good practices. So this all speaks to the standards we meant to or have applied on configuring Figshare to be a professional and good platform onto which to load data. Next slide, please. Similarly here, also on metadata standards, in terms of an API, the intention certainly would be to be able to share data with other research entities, but also to ingest data from other research entities, like, for example, the IBOA or EGA, which are astronomy research centers. And the thinking was to use the API on their systems to be called and to ingest data from their systems where the researcher might have already uploaded the data, saving them the time and the effort to upload it again into Figshare. Now, that level of interoperability or that level of integration we have not implemented yet, but they are certainly possibilities for in the future. Same here also for the SWORD protocol, which is a simple method which uses a RESTful API to ingest data from a different system into your repository. Many of you who might have DSpace repositories will be using this already to ingest data, for example, from the Biomed central database into your DSpace institutional repositories. Next slide, please. Nicholas has touched on this point. Once the data is in the system, you need a good community of practice, curators in your different faculties to double check the data, verify the data, and ensure it's complete and useful for that discipline of study. Next slide, please. Moving on to interoperability here. Here, the working group investigated how the ability of systems to exchange data, and then also the data format to facilitate that sharing of information. So that was the focus of interoperability here. Next slide, please. And with reference to the ilifu guidelines in section C.3, as Nicholas also said, the facility will be compliant with international data standards to enable discoverability, for example, data object identifiers. And having said that, the project realized that not all data that is discoverable can be freely accessed. They are still subject to embargoes and access control and permission restrictions. So the digital object identifier is the main mechanism of making our data discoverable and interoperable with other systems. Next slide, please. Yes, I've touched on that as well. That refers to data citation, just in a different section of the ilifu guidelines, but also referring to data object identifiers. Next slide, please. Yeah, more from a systems consideration perspective, if you're looking at the standards for interoperability, there are such standards, and they're very well articulated and described in the data, in work from the Research Data Alliance. They have different working groups and focus groups, and some of the working groups have produced standards for interoperability models, and those standards are available at those DOI locations which are listed there, and you can have a look at those at your leisure. Those were taken into account in the work of the working group to, at least from a theoretical perspective, if not anything more, to have a good understanding of what is needed for interoperability with data repositories. Next slide, please. And there's just the question I'm putting out there. You might have the data on the system, and you might be able to make a data interoperable with the DOI, but certainly you also want to index that data into a Google data set, for example. And how do you make that data interoperable with big data storage platforms like iRights? So that's a question to be put out there. Shalene's camera going on makes me nervous. My time is certainly going up, so I'm going to just move on slightly faster. Next slide, please. Certification, I'll be brief, and this is where we're looking at the compliance to best practices and administering data infrastructures. And this has been touched on by Elijah. So next slide, please. Just one point I would like to reiterate here is that you could have characteristics of trustworthy repositories, but you have also certification methods, and there are basically three. And the three is the audit-based one, based on ISO standards. And here it's very important to note that OAIS framework is not a certification standard. It's a compliance framework. Secondly, you have self-assessment, and thirdly, you have accreditation based on some form of certification, and that is what we've done in the project. Next slide, please. And we've done that through our application to the Core Trust Seal for a Trusted Digital Repository certification accreditation. Next slide, please. And you can have a look at that slide in detail. And I'm moving to my last slides. And this was the last brief of the working group to have a look into data archiving, backup, and loss considerations, and that's the ability of the data infrastructure to store data and preserve it over the term required. I've only got 2 slides left. Next slide, please. What I would like to mention here is perhaps of interest to everybody in South Africa who has a fixture repository and who are perhaps considering getting one. And that is very, very important, that you can't have a hybrid data storage model for a fixture repository. You can't have cloud storage and attach local storage to it. You have to decide whether you want only local storage or cloud storage attached, okay? And there are currently 4 million outputs on Figshare across all their customers. And that leaves them with a $1.80 per gigabit bill with Amazon Web Services for the data they host on that platform. That's very expensive. So they're reviewing this. Next slide, please. And the 100 terabyte storage offering we've got through the ilifu project, this is going to be reviewed. And as from next year, everybody will only get 10 terabytes. And that includes the ilifu institutions who have signed up a couple of years ago already with Figshare. As from the 1st of January 2023, our storage plan will be reduced from 100 terabyte to 10 terabyte, but we have an option to buy additional storage above 10 terabytes if so needed. And then we would be billed for the actual storage and egress above 10 terabyte. Next slide, my last slide. One last point I would like to raise in terms of backup and loss. And that is that a digital preservation system is of crucial importance. It's a crucial importance to this project and for all data repositories in the country. And it's an absolute necessity to have a digital preservation system in place in order to receive certification from the Core Trust Seal. Section 16.8 of the Universities of South Africa Papaya Guide explains the considerations of data transfer to other countries. That basically implies that preferences are for hosting your data in South Africa and thereafter in the EU. But the point I'm trying to make is you might host your data abroad, but still try and preserve your data on local soil. And I think going forward, this might be a good initiative for a good shared regional or national initiative for South Africa, once again, to investigate a national digital preservation system. And with that, I thank you for your time and attention. Sorry for going over my time.
No problem. Wouter, thank you very much. It was very detailed and informative, and I'm sure the participants enjoyed it, except that we would have loved to hear more from you, but time does not permit us. I would like to now, we would like to go to the conclusion, and I would ask the project, ilifu project leader, Dr. Chiwari, to sum up and perhaps answer some of the questions raised. Dr. Chiwari, maybe you can sum up and conclude the webinar?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay, so I've got a number of slides so that I can just make the final conclusions, and also just talk about one or two future directions that we are taking. So as part and parcel of the RDM project, I think I've also been asked to talk about user engagement. I think we all know that in any service development, it is really critical to really engage the users, more so for issues relating to research data. I think we are finding out that by and large, researchers are very sensitive, and we have to engage them early on. Otherwise, I think some of these beautiful infrastructures and policies that we are putting in place, they will go to naught. So what we also did, we ran a number of workshops, and some of the issues that we really shared and discussed with the researchers. We're going to use the facilities were legal and ethical issues around data sharing. And what we did here was to really bring experts. We brought in an expert from UCT, who is a SACHI research chair in intellectual property, to really unpack the issues. And I think it was very enlightening to really get an in-detail understanding of the national legal frameworks that relate to data sharing. And also, we reviewed the policies and guidelines that we had developed before we submitted them to DERISA. We also very much discussed the modalities of the work integrated learning program, as well as some of the engagement was centered around the use of the DMPs, which ones are acceptable institutional ones, DERISA ones, or whatever. So very healthy discussions, which I think in the end really assisted us in shaping the direction that we finally reached. So there is the one of the workshops you can see in front of you. Maybe let me just, put this in sharing mode. Some of the presentations, a lot of us, including those who have also spoken today, were there to speak about different issues and share with the researchers and so on. So in terms of the future project, where are we going? Last year, the whole ilifu project submitted a proposal for the renewal of the project. And in the last 1 or 2 months, we have just received a response from DERISA or DSI that the project has been renewed for another year with a possibility for another 2 years. But there are certain conditions that have to be met before we can move on to the next 2 years. One of the key issues that really the DSI would really want to see, and they are really very adamant about this, is really the participation of all the partner members, so that probably one institution, 1 or 2, do not really dominate the project. So whatever we are doing, DSI is always present to ensure that everybody is being brought on board. And the hope is that when the future nodes are really developed in other regions, the same approach that has panned out in the Western Cape can also be a learning curve for others. So with relation to RDM activities, the component that we applied for in the renewal of the project to do with the ilifu advocacy program, continuing to advocate for the program and market and promote the infrastructure, and also to work on the work integrated learning program and the issue of publications tracking, application programs interfaces, and also linking these activities to a new kid on the block, the South African Open Science Cloud. And I'll talk about that just now. So the South African Open Science Cloud initiative is another policy framework which is going to be linked to the currently unraveling national open science policy framework. So what has been happening over the years is that South Africa and the European Union have established a dialogue or a platform where we are really learning from the European Union in terms of developing some of these infrastructures. So the dialogue we set a number of years ago to start working on the open science platform, and now we are beginning to see the results. And the European Open Science Cloud, which is also a very vibrant community, has come on board to assist in the establishment of the South African Open Science policy framework, which again is going to be an anchor to the national open science policy framework. So the South African Open Science Cloud has been working in the last 2 or 3 months, and they've asked some of us to participate. And in the last 2 weeks, a declaration has been put forward. And this declaration talks to a number of issues, and some of them are really in front of us. They talk about recognizing the challenges of data-driven research in terms of pursuing excellency, and granting that the vision of South African Open Science Cloud is that of a research-intensive data commons, widely inclusive of all disciplines, and sustainable in the long term. So really the government's vision is that throughout the whole country, there should be a number of nodes that will support national, the national tier 1 level, and also acknowledging that the South African Open Science Cloud framework will be the best guarantee for all South African research and researchers to secure equitable access to relevant data. And also the question of making sure that we don't languish behind the global movement of open science clouds, that once South African Open Science Cloud is developed, it is also linked to other clouds globally. And also to ensure the implementation of that process, that is not just a project by its nature, but it really becomes collaborative in nature, and that it also becomes a learning curve for everybody who is participating in that. So within this South African Open Science Cloud declaration, there are a number of committees, and there are specifically 4 of them. One is on technical implementation, the second one is on data quality, the third one is on sustainability, and the 4th one is on governance. And in relation to us as librarians or the library sector, I think our work is really in the second committee, and that's where we have been participating and making a very specific inputs. So within the data quality working group, there are a number of actions that have been put forward, and 4 of them. And it's the question of implementing FAIR principles for greater access and reuse of data, and to support the whole question of multidisciplinarity, and also to invest in building research data management capacity within the country, and the question of training data stewards to ensure that data quality, and the whole question of overseeing the evolution of data management ecosystem in the country is aligned with evolving international policies and guidelines, as well as prioritizing key domains and to target postgraduate students. I think Alfred earlier on was talking about targeting postgraduate students, making certain RDM courses compulsory. And we have also spoken about probably the 2 library schools, that is UCT, where there's a very vibrant RDM courses, and also at UWC in their library school, there is a course within the master's program, which is called data stewardship. And I also had an opportunity to teach on that course, and it's actually running for its second year now. So maybe let me just take a number of those issues without wasting much time that relate to the to data quality. So what I did was from action 1, action 2, 3, and 4, I picked a number of things that I thought might be relevant just to highlight. And this is to do with the application of FAIR principles and the coordination and development of FAIR practices, and also enriching the South African expertise in machine actionable data curation, as well as the provision of long-term commitment to local support for repository certification. Like I said earlier on, that we have gained quite a lot of experience here in the Western Cape, and we'll probably want to share with others as you go along and try to take on that task. And also to extend the work that some of the existing communities of practices, like the NEDI, are doing, so that really there is that congruence and of data stewards, so that we can all talk about the same issues and see how we can tackle some of these issues at the national level. And also the question of defining the job profiles for data stewards who are really going to work in data governance and creation is also very, very critical. And the acknowledgement of the contributions that data stewards will make towards achieving the question of fair standards, and also to engage with other volunteer groups, CoData, RDA, in their summer schools, and send some of our own librarians and technicians to those courses so that they can gain the necessary skills, and also to identify very specific or South African centric as well as globally applicable curricula in data stewardship. I think those are some of the key things that I wanted to highlight coming out of the South African Open Science Club. Thank you, Chair. I think that will be all from me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Chaware. That was certainly some reinvigoration of the role that librarians and data stewards have to play in the open science arena that we are faced with. So there's huge opportunities. Colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to thank each and every one of you. I want to say that we have recorded 100 participants for this webinar. I want to really thank you. I wish to also thank the presenters, and I must admit they have given a fantastic presentations under a lot of time pressure. But I would also maybe like to open the floor at this stage to maybe invite 1 or 2 questions. I do realize it has been a long webinar, and perhaps we would have had a better chance to say maybe a 10-minute break in between. But this is a learning curve, and I just said to Anka now, going forth, maybe we will plan better. And that is all about how we as librarians are becoming more agile. Okay, I see a hand. It's Daisy. Daisy, you want to unmute? You can ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think mine is a quick one to. It's not Michelle.
I know, it's Rosina. Daisy?
Yes.
Quickly.
Okay. Elisha and Voter, I just want to highlight that it's quite important for us to reinforce the issue around the data seal of approval, that it's for the repository. I've picked it up of recent, the talk around our colleagues who are responsible in our respective institutions for research data management, in the library in particular, who are talking about certification of librarians responsible for RDM, and I was quite shocked. And I even said, internationally, I've never seen such a thing. I serve on CoData, and I've been with CoData for, I don't know, 16 years. And I've never heard of us talking about certification of people dealing with or data stewards. So I think we need to demystify this notion, and it's being filtered through to the research office and the academia. And I'm concerned about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daisy. I don't know whether there is a response, but that is something that definitely needs to be flagged. I think there was there another hand up or not?
No hands at the moment.
Okay. Dr. Chiwara, you want to say something about the certification of the librarians? That's strange for data.
Yes. Yeah, maybe it's just the use of terminology and here and there. But I guess, I mean, what you have started today, Chair, is really the right way, that we keep on sharing and educating each other in terms of really what should be done. But I think it's important that, you know, before we deploy some of our librarians into the faculties and into these research communities and research groups, we really equip them with the right skills, terminologies, and so on, because some of the researchers, once they realize that we are talking about things that we are not fully acquainted with, they'll never want to see us again back to talk about the same issues. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Chiwara. I think I want to say to colleagues, this was a sharing session. It was a very informative session, but I think it's all dependent on us, you know, reaching out and sharing with each other, and so this is why this webinar was actually structured around sharing and getting to know what is ilifu and how can we engage with the colleagues. And it's I just want to say that no librarian is alone. We are a whole group of qualified, knowledgeable, and skilled librarians, and we can reach out at any time. So this was the platform, and this is how we should be doing things in the future, especially in light of being an agile leadership in Africa, and moving towards best practices, moving towards good standards in not only in data research, data management, but in reinvigorating our role in the university, the library's role in the university. Thank you very much, everybody. I see one last hand, and then I do realize that people need to leave. Is there a hand, Anka?
Yes, Chair. Nkuleko.
Sorry, colleagues, I know that we almost we're running out of time already. I'm concerned a little bit. I don't know if one of the speakers can help. I am struggling to get academics to come in giving us their research data in our repository, and I was wondering if there's any advice because I was looking at the field share that the guys were showing during the presentation, and look at their numbers. It was amazing. Looked like there's a lot of involvement with regard to academics putting stuff in the repository, but I'm struggling to have them coming in, buy in. I wonder if there's any ideas or something that they can share with me that can help me. Thank you. I'm sorry. I know that we are out of time.
No problem. Nkuleko, I think the first step is to start with your research office and your postgraduate officers. Work from there, and then you will reach out in that way. But I don't know whether any of the presenters want to say something quickly.
From my side, I think it's before you deploy any services, it's really critical really to engage. One of the approaches that we took at CPUT was to put the research office in the forefront. We did all the dirty work behind closed doors, but in terms of all our RDM working groups, when we were initiating the services, we gave the reins to the research office. And that built a certain level of confidence within the research community that this was really a collaborative approach rather than just a library off-the-cuff project. So early on, make sure that you have really engaged in planning and implementing the services before you even start calling up for data. Thank you.
Okay. I want to sincerely thank you once again, and I will bring to the webinar to a close. And I want to wish you the very best for the weekend. Please stay safe and take care, colleagues. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.